Hi, recording this intro with a little bit of a cold, a couple of weeks or a week and a half after I actually recorded it with Tom. Just to give a little context about why Tom the taxi driver. It's actually the first person that I've managed to interview who I don't know at all, or I reached out to through the magic of the internet. He has a YouTube channel which I really would love you to go and subscribe to and watch some of the videos. They're excellent. And he also has a book about how to pass the how to be a London taxi driver. The reason I talked to him actually, and the reason I reached out to him was part of my book that I'm writing. I referenced the knowledge, which is the test that London taxi drivers have to take. It's a famous test. And the disrupting nature of the likes of Uber and Google Maps and what that means for the industry. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to actually get the opinion of a London taxi driver? And fortunately for me, Tom was very much willing to have that conversation. So I hope you enjoy it. I certainly did. And Tom, if you're watching, thanks again so much for the conversation. I really appreciate it. And I wish you all the best. All right. Enjoy the conversation, guys. Bye.
Hi, you're listening to Wimbledon, hosted by me, Nick Ray. Hi everyone, so I'm here with Tom Hutley. He is a London taxi driver with a YouTube channel, a very cool YouTube channel, and quite a big following now, so he's doing pretty well. But could be doing even better with some of you guys following him. So that's going to be one of the things I want to encourage is you go and check out his YouTube channel and subscribe and like these his videos. But also he's got a book and in Amazon, and he also does tour guiding around London. And I know a lot of my friends are over in London, so maybe some of you guys are even listening or watching this are over there. So you're going to have to check Tom out and go and hire him for some tours around London. But I'm going to pass over to Tom now just to introduce himself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to and how you got to be where you're at, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, so cheers for the introduction there. Really means a lot, and thank you for reaching out. It's well, I love doing this. I love the podcast medium. So yeah, I'm really glad to be on board. So yeah, of course, I am a taxi driver. That is kind of my day job. I originally became a taxi driver. Got my badge about 3.5 years ago after 3 years of studying the arduous knowledge, as it's always in capitals. But largely just because of like a freedom of work, freedom of life. I'd always worked within like retail backgrounds, so working on weekends and, you know, from start to close, all that sort of thing never really fazed me. It was just part of life. But I just always begrudged having to work for someone else, having to be at a certain place at a certain time, having to book time off, having to book weekends off. So for me, taxi driving kind of fitted that bill. I initially got into it because I just had a bit of an interest for London, and as I started learning the streets, I thought, well, you know what, this isn't that bad a gig. So I carried on, and this is where I got to. My journey kind of now into a lockdown world. Beginning of the first lockdown, I kind of had a little bit of an identity crisis because with less people on the street, not being able to pick up fares, not being able to do my job in the usual way, I was like, right, now what? Am I still a taxi driver? What am I? So I created some videos for YouTube. So I've been doing that for the past year. It's kind of ramped up a bit more now because I'm now doing taxi driving. That's where I am now, in the back of my taxi, as well as those YouTube videos. So I'm pretty full time, really.
Yeah, you're certainly pumping out a lot of content on YouTube, which is obviously where I can see you. I can't come and take a cab ride in London at the moment. I'd love to come to the UK because my mum is desperate for a visit. We haven't seen each other for a long time now, so she lives down in Red Hill, so below London.
Yeah.
But so Tom, thank you so much again for spending some time talking to me. I super appreciate it, and I'm very excited to talk to you. In a big part because actually the knowledge, I'm fascinated by the knowledge. I knew about it. I was born in London, and I knew about the knowledge for my whole sort of life from teenagers up onwards, and obviously about how amazing it is to achieve the 25,000 streets or something you have to learn.
It's kind of over kind of hyped a bit. That's kind of like this number that everyone's latched onto. Because like every sort of media outlet likes to play it up, and I think a lot of cab drivers like to kind of big it up as well. It is a huge amount of effort. Basically, I think it's it's a potential of 25,000 roads, because technically any examiner can ask you anywhere in London, you know, within this massive map. You have 6 mile radius of Charing Cross. Yeah, so it's a potential of that many roads, but really, you know, you're talking about maybe more 9,000, 10,000 sort of points of interest to 15,000 by the time you get your flag. So
I'm pretty sure everyone listening is going to be like, okay, that's still a hell of a lot. And I think what's so impressive as well, you talk about something. I've watched quite a few of your videos now in my homework, and you talk. It's very useful to have all those videos to do the homework, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
So future guests, do loads of YouTube videos. But you talk about the runs. You learn a lot of different runs, right? And that's how you sort of build up the knowledge bit by learning these different runs. And you talk about calling them out as well, but you're literally saying them out loud because you have to talk them through in your exam and things.
Yeah.
Can you talk me a bit through that process? Because in my mind, the main reason I think I've got you, or I wanted you to come on, was because it is such a huge achievement to get the knowledge, and it requires such a lot of dedication, resilience to sort of get through. You know, I think you said 2, maybe 3 years it can take to get through the process. You're out on your bike, you know, everyone gets a little moped and goes out in the rain or shine and with their board, looking at all these different runs. Can you talk me through, like, how did you decide to do it? What strategies did you use in terms of, like, you know, did you follow a well-known strategy, or did you build your own? And also, what kept you motivated throughout? Like, how did you not decide, you know what, I've done 1,000, I've got so many more 1,000 to go?
Well, that is one of the sort of stumbling blocks of it. So as you said, it is about, you know, it's about a 3 to 5 year process. It can be longer, it can be quicker because of the way the examination system works. But I'll start with what you said at the beginning with the runs. And what a run is, it's basically a journey. So you start from one point of interest to another point. The very first one on the knowledge starts in an area of London near Finsbury Park called Manor House Tube Station, and that goes to Gibson Square. And that is just off of Upper Street in Islington. A siren going past. I was waiting for that to pass.
It's authentic.
And it's all the genuine London article. So you run that run, and there's 320 of these runs to go by. Now, what these are kind of like, imagine if you was to learn a language, or you was to go to a different country to learn a language. The runs are kind of like your basic phrases, if you will. So it's equivalent to learn a language. You learn like these 320 kind of phrases that will get you through most situations. But then it doesn't stop there. There's all the other little bits connecting, because by the time you've done 320 runs, you've got a really good idea of London. But then you need to start formalising your own routes. And again, using the language analogy, it's then saying, right, you've learnt these phrases, but how can you join these phrases together, or these sentences together, to make a more fluent conversation, if you will. And that's kind of what it then becomes. When you go to the exams, a lot of people kind of misinterpret how a taxi exam works. They think, oh, you must do like a driving exam, you must drive them across the city. Well, that would be really, really easy. The way it actually works is that you just opposite an examiner, like in this situation here, you turn up like you're going to your GP or your doctors for a medical appointment. You have to turn up fully suited, otherwise they'll turn you away. And they'll sit you down and they'll go, right, Mr. Hutley, take me from the Battersea Cats and Dogs home, and we're going to go to the Dogs Trust. You have to say, yes, sir, or ma'am. The Battersea Cats and Dogs home is on Battersea Park Road, and the Dogs Trust on Wakeley Street. And they say, right, run it for me. And then in your head, you then have to mentally recite that route. So it coming back to the language analogy, it's very, I would say, probably close to that. And you're kind of, what people don't get as well is that the knowledge is a study of the map itself. It's to prove you know the ins and outs of that map. It's not necessarily how you would drive it on the road. It's to prove to that examiner, who is a qualified taxi driver themselves, that you have obsessed grossly about that you know every single possibility and option. Because when you come out here and when you are a cab driver, it is understanding all those options that exist. To answer your question in terms of the study element of it, initially, like some people, and I think when you start any new big project, you kind of find your feet a little bit, you do it haphazardly, you do it a little bit wrong. But once I got into it, I really enjoyed the process, because I approached it like an athlete, almost like an elite athlete, how I imagine they would have a training regime or program for say, competing. You know, like a boxer who does certain exercises and things leading up to the big match, because it was your exams would happen every 2 months, then followed by every month and so forth. But it was building up to that date, so it was being effective, like in your studying for that date. You know, you wouldn't go out like the night before your exam and try and learn loads of new bits of London. You would refresh what you've already done, and then conversely, once you've just had an exam, that's then the best time to go out and learn stuff, because you've got a good month to kind of digest it all. So that's kind of a bit of an insight about how it all works, really.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that approach, you've also written a book, how to pass the knowledge. I can't remember the title.
Yeah, how to become a London black cab driver. And it kind of approaches some of these things that I did. You know, like I got really serious about sleep. I researched into sleep, because I was working full time. I had to commute an hour into London to actually then go see these points of interest. You have to physically see the streets. Street view doesn't cut it because it's not up to date. You don't get true representation. And then, of course, you have to be at the map calling over all the time. So juggling all those things, I was running out of time. So I was like, right, okay, maybe I can hack my sleep somehow. Maybe if I can get a few shorter nights here, I can then do that. And then I then quickly realised that's not the case. So I then optimised my sleep. I found out I could do more if I got better quality sleep. Little things like that, you know. I used to have a banana before my exams, because I learned, you know, I read a bit of research that there were them anti-anxiety inducing. So before you sit the exam, and part of the routine as well, you know, I would do like a mental kind of checklist that I would do before I sit my exam. All these kind of things that just kind of get all your ducks in a row for the best chance of success, really.
Yeah. Honestly, that's exactly the sort of thing that I've been talking about, and it doesn't surprise me that you've done this process to get there. And I do wonder how many people are that sort of, you know, targeted and driven in the way that they approach it. But I can see from also the way you do your YouTube videos, you're talking very openly and very authentic. And I think for me, I'm going to guess here, I'm going to go out on a limb, but you approach YouTube in a similar way to the way that I am approaching this podcast, but I'm also approaching the way in which I try to interact with people with authenticity. You're very open about what you want, how you want it, and where you're going, and you're also open about what you don't know and how you're wanting to learn. And I think that authenticity is what's going to gain you an even bigger audience on YouTube, and certainly the ones I've seen on YouTube have been successful for that reason. That the authenticity shines through.
Well, kind of have a bit of a pessimistic kind of look to it, where I think I don't. It's the old Bruce Lee quote that you know, I don't fear the man who's who's learned 1,000 punches or 1,000 kicks. I fear the man that's learned one kick and he's done it 1,000 times. You know, he's practiced that. And I don't, to kind of elaborate on that, I don't really, if there's something I'm a bit weak on, you know, that's kind of where I want to explore it. And also if something's working, then I then stick towards that. So yeah, it's just about knowing where your strengths and weaknesses lie. When it came to the knowledge, you don't really want to, stuff you're strong on, you kind of should push that to the side and say, right, I'm good at that, let me focus on the weak stuff, because that's the stuff that's going to get exploited and pulled apart. And I think you have to be quite honest and quite critical of that, and just know that you're vulnerable, and then look at your vulnerabilities, and then you can then strengthen those who kind of come at it from all angles. But
yeah, I guess it's so I've had a few people on the podcast talking about strengths, and especially talking, there's a theory called Strengths Finder, or not a theory, a methodology called Strengths Finder. I don't know if you've heard of it, but I had a Strengths Finder coach on there, and they focus very much on what are your strengths, and then push those forward, and, you know, ignore your weaknesses. But I guess to your point is, if you need to pass a certain bar across the board, then you need to get the whatever you're not strong in up to that bar at least. And get everything over the bar. But another thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I did kind of preempt just before we came live, I did give you a little, I actually read a little bit of my book to Tom. So Tom is the first person apart from my wife who's heard any of my
early access.
Very early access. It's still a long way to go. But the reason I did that was because I talked about strategy and skills and talents and the talent required to execute a strategy. And I use the example of the knowledge, actually. So in London, obviously for, hundreds of years. I think since 1850s or something, the knowledge has
Yes,
been around. Something like that.
just after the Great Exhibition, which was 1851, and it's kind of a bit kind of lost as to what the date was it was officially formalised. But following the Great Exhibition, when loads of people came and visit, London was obviously, the UK was a massive powerhouse in terms of industry and what the British Empire was doing. So it was a big kind of gloating festival put on by Prince Albert in Hyde Park, original Crystal Palace that was based there. Come look at us, look how great we're doing. And then, the people who were coming to visit, all from all around the world, it attracted about 2 million people in a 6-month period of time, all got taxi rides to areas a bit more out of the central London, maybe down to, I don't know the exact locations, but maybe down to Clapham, up to Islington and stuff like that. Yeah. But the taxi drivers of the day didn't know where they were going, and that was then deemed, it was like a failure. Like, okay, we've put on this amazing show of what the British Empire can do, but our taxi drivers are terrible. Let's sort this out. And from that point forward, the knowledge was said to have been introduced.
Yeah, so it's legendary. I mean, it's been around for so long, and it's such and it's obviously got more complicated. I mean, my God, if you watch some of the videos, I tell you one fun video. I'll maybe link it below. Is the one where you're playing some game, a video game about being a cabbie, and you're just getting annoyed because you're like that there's a street there, that's not correct, this is wrong, and I'm just laughing because you're banging into lampposts and things and seemingly not noticing because it's a video game. But I think that knowledge and that the knowledge and the complexity of it and the sort of the way it's held, it held true that by far the best person who could get you around London anywhere up until the advent of Google Maps was 100% a black cab driver. And even now I still think that's the truth, because I've seen again some of your videos saying, well, it's crappy directions on Google Maps and things. However, it has to be acknowledged that technology has dramatically affected the game in which the taxi drivers are playing, and it's dramatically affected the landscape, because of course you also have companies like Uber coming in and offering a very similar, if not the same type of service. It's not the same. You've got a nice roomy cab you're sitting in the back of right now. It looks, you've got comfort and you've got 5 seats, and there's lots of other reasons. But essentially, if I'm one person needing to get across from one place to another in London, I have options now of multiple things which will be more or less accurate. And I think that dramatic change in the landscape, Transport for London, which runs the black cabs, in my opinion, has not adapted fast enough to really push forward and re-strategize, as it were, that what black cabs are for, why people should be hopping into black cabs, perhaps changing the dynamic in the way in which they work with the drivers to give the drivers more opportunities to earn more money or whatever.
Yeah.
I wanted to throw that at you, and I asked before, is that okay? Because I know it's controversial, and a lot of black taxi drivers are going to get very upset about that, and have a very strong opinion to that. But I wanted to hear your opinion, because I've heard you talk, and I think you're very open about these things.
So I want to open with a quite a contentious line, and that is that on paper, I think the Uber model is brilliant.
Okay.
How amazing is that, right? Okay, hear me out. Yeah, when you look at, obviously Uber is a global company, and when you look at some markets across the world, say places in rural America where there isn't a taxi service, where you do get like high rates of people, drink driving, because there is no efficient way to get about. There's, bus services aren't the sort of, we take for granted in London how good our transport network is. And like I say, you go to places in rural America, I'm sure that translates all across Europe and wherever else in the world. There is very much a need for it. And, when you look at Uber's original business model, it was a ride-sharing platform. They still call it a ride-sharing platform, because it's the idea is you've got a car, you're going to work, you can share it with all these people and earn a little bit of money on the way. So that, I like the idea of that, because that then means, less traffic, in terms of going green and, like zero emissions and things like that. That works really, really well in that favour as well. Where it kind of falls down is obviously how it's tried to grow, and then what's then been happening in cities like London. I've got to be careful, because the trouble is I can ramble on too long about this. I'm just trying to pull apart the main sort of things. I think in a nod to what you were saying about, Transport for London's perspective on it, how they've kind of all. I think it's definitely blurred the line, because years ago, what it used to be was you'd have mini cabs in London, and this I'm just talking about London specifically here,
Yep,
but you have
yes.
mini cabs in London and you have taxis. And the idea was a mini cab, you'd have to go to a mini cab office, you'd have to pre-book the ride. The person who would drive you would then have to kind of pre-look at the route and go, okay, we're going to go there. And you generally got it cheaper, because, of course, there was certain overheads they don't have to cover. They have to go through the knowledge, etc., etc. So you could sort of understand that. Okay, if I pay a bit more for a taxi, I can get one there and then. Minicab, I've got to wait a little bit, but it's a bit cheaper. So there was kind of a trade-off there. It kind of went buses, minicab, taxis. And then what you're saying in terms of Uber, I think that's definitely blurred the line. That's almost kind of slid right between the minicab and the taxi model. In some cases, I think when Uber was first launched in London, it became like on par with taxis almost, because it was this, look at this app. Oh, it comes directly to me. I've not got to go to the office. It comes to my door. And then, I get there and it's remarkably cheaper. It feels much the same as a taxi. But as it's kind of gone on, as it's translated through, I think a lot of people have kind of had their first experiences with Uber. Maybe it's been an upgrade from getting the bus or wherever. Maybe they've not had as good a service. It's maybe, if anything, it's probably made the market a little bit bigger, because it's pulled people into the world of kind of private transportation. So they might have had an Uber before and they're going, you know what? Let's get into a taxi, because the Uber driver didn't necessarily know where he was going, and or things like that. And the only other problem I have really is the sort of regulation side of Uber. We've seen it in court rulings even just this year, with terms of how they employ their drivers. Are they self-employed? Are they employed? They've gone all the way to the Supreme Court. It's been going in courts for about sort of 4 years or so, and it's been ruled that they are employees. They're technically employees, because Uber then delivers them the work. They are then in demand for that. I think I've probably gone off the topic a little bit.
No, but I think that's interesting. So if I can just jump in there,
Yeah.
because I think you're right, and I agree with everything you've said, and so for me there's no contention there. I also think Uber's an amazing business model. I think being a disruptor like that and pushing for growth like they have, I think it's very much out of I think it's a Silicon Valley company, but anyway, it's very much out of that ethos of startup and hit it hard and almost break the ruls and then say sorry later and work it out.
Just to elaborate on that, I wanted to, sorry to interrupt, but like before, we go a bit further down it. So I thought the actual initial, if you write it down on paper, that's what I agree with. Where it's gone now, just so people don't look at me and go, "Oh, you're a taxi driver saying you love Uber." I'm not saying that. What is the way the business model was morphed is now what I don't agree with, because it's like a predatory model, very much like Amazon. I mean, I use Amazon, but like the thing is that their prices aren't set. So on an Uber model, the prices can surge based upon if it's raining, if it's busy in London, if it's artificially done by drivers logging out of the app, which does happen. So you're not getting a fair and regulated ride. And the trouble is, you can see why drivers do that or try and exploit that to get the most money out of it, because they don't get much of a share once Uber takes their cut. It's not the driver's fault. These guys are just trying to go out and earn like some honest money, really. And there's no barriers to entry. You can get a car, you can then go get a license from TfL and go do this relatively easy. But I think it's the big company. We live in a world where we're very conscious on sweatshop labour, where we consume from we don't like having plastic because of the effects on the environment. But we're not looking at the big issue on our doorstep, where is it a fair environment for that driver? The cost of a black cab isn't because I've done all the knowledge and things like that. It's because for me to get this vehicle to come and operate in London, and the fare that is then set by TfL is to ensure that I, as a driver, take home a suitable living wage. It's not mad, it's not massive, it's not hugely inflated. So that's kind of where I sit with Uber. I just think that the company, and the valuation it has is based upon it's just based upon nothing. It doesn't own anything, it doesn't own any drivers, it doesn't really own any assets. It's not like a traditional brick and mortar sort of business.
I think if we stick with London as well, I mean, I've been lucky enough to go around lots of different cities all over and see some with Uber and some with different models. I mean, I lived in Hong Kong most recently, and that's got a very different setup. It has got Uber, but basically you only use Uber to get to the airport and back. Like it's more like a mini cab, but
like a shuttle service almost.
You almost it's sort of just order it direct. But I think in London, yeah, it's a good thing that they've agreed that they're employees, because I think the way they were doing that was that was saving Uber a lot of money, right? So now that cost that's implied in the way in which they're going to have to give their drivers more benefits and pay them as employees, that cost will obviously relate back to the cost in the app and how much it's going to cost you to take an Uber, because it is a business that will do that. I think what's interesting for me is, Transport for London, their attention, as far as I can tell at least, has been very focused on Uber's bad, they're not doing this, they're not doing that, like this is it's breaking rules here, it's not treating its drivers well and everything, and not kind of like, well, what about surge pricing for taxis? What about black cabs? Like, could we change the way black cabs operate that's still fair and works well for the black cab? It works better for the black cab drivers. Is there a way to do that? Because I agree with your point of private transportation. I think it's massively expanded the number of people who are jumping in taxis or Ubers now. I think it's a huge amount more, and that's why I also don't worry that black cabs are dead in the water. Like, I don't think you're in a dying trade. I think it is in a trade where it should be dynamic. It should be able to be a bit more dynamic. And also, what are the barriers to entry for a black cab driver? You've taken the time and the energy and the effort to learn the knowledge, but in reality, as technology improves, is that really going to be so necessary in the future? Or is it more the integrity, the eagerness to display this wonderful city, for example, and give points of interest and give more of a tour guidey kind of experience, which is what a lot of black cab drivers are excellent at. They got the patter, they sit and chat about all these different places, which I cannot imagine an Uber driver being able to do that. I just don't see it unless they were really weird. It's something that's special, and I think that's where, in my opinion, the Transport for London especially have missed a trick, because they've not re-strategized. But what do you think to that? Because I know that's controversial, and I'm sure, and I know as well, you have a lot of people following you, because I also read some of your comments, like, who are cab drivers. They're sitting there talking about their experience, talking about the trade, and you've created quite a lot of conversation around these topics with your videos.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I wanted my YouTube to come about. I'm not there to just do the usual cab rhetoric and saying, oh, okay, Uber's bad, get a black cab driver. I want to sort of say, right, this is why it's priced this way. This is the hoops and that we have to jump through. And things like that. One thing, let's go back to your sort of first point on sort of pricing, can the black cab driver surge and things like that? Well, we actually get, roughly every year, in line with inflation, we get like a consultation come through from Transport for London. It's handed out to the unions. The unions have a look at our taxi driver unions, and us as drivers can vote on it as well. And usually they say, look, what do you want to do with the fares? Do you want them to go up? Do you want them to stay the same? Do you want them to go down? And generally, most drivers, and even the old school diehard ones, don't really want fares to go up. I mean, it's only like 20p here and there. Like, the meter at the moment starts at £3.20. So if you get in, starts at £3.20, which I might add is actually significantly cheaper than Uber. I think theirs starts at £5, maybe. I don't know. Addison Lee, £8. So that's I don't know. I've not got in one, so I don't know what it comes at. But that's what I've heard. I
haven't been there long enough. I haven't been for a long time.
But we don't really want to put prices up, because it's, so long as, like I say, so long as we've got a sustainable living wage, like it doesn't make that much of a difference anyway. But you don't really want to be scaring people away with that. It's one of the good things about a black cab as well, is the fact that we don't have surge pricing. That meter price is set by TfL. You'll have a little rate chart that's on TfL's website and inside of every single black cab to tell you, how much that then comes to. On your point for integrity, one thing that is good about the knowledge, because some people say, look, do you really need to do 3 years of studying? What is that all about? I can hark on about it, the reasons and the ins and outs as to why it's good, why it's better than SatNav. I've got videos where I'm beating SatNavs on my YouTube, whatever. But one of the best things about it... Good videos. Thank you. But one of the best things about it is the fact that it's a long dedication. It's effectively, I tell people, it's the longest drawn-out job interview in the world. And what that then means is that when you become a taxi driver, I mean, years ago, they don't really do this much now because of political correctness, but when you used to sit your exams, you'd have the examiners would tease you, they would throw stuff at you, like you was back at school basically, like you just trying to put you off on all sorts. And that was to simulate what a passenger would be like in the cab. They would say, "Sorry, sir, I didn't hear what you said there. What was that? What was that?" Trying to get you to kind of react and shout at them and go, "Oh, I said this," because they're testing your temperament. So that, along with the fact that it's like a long process, 3-5 years, then means that when you are driving a cab, we've all got this badge. It's taken us so long to earn our cab badge. We're not going to risk that or put that at risk for anything. If someone says, "Oh, well, your cab's got 6 seats. Do you reckon you could squeeze 7 people in there?" No, I can't. It's the rule. I'm not doing it. There's no way would I ever compromise. And that's what loads of cab drivers are all in the same boat, really. Whereas if you then get into something like Uber, where the barriers to entry is lower, you go, "Well, you know what? I only had to fill out a few boxes and do this simple exam," then you might be more willing to take those kind of risks, really. And I think that's one of the sort of problems to that as well.
Well, of course, you also hear the horror stories, unfortunately, with badly, they haven't been background checked properly, and there's been some really nasty stories with Uber. I guess not just Uber. I'm not here to make Uber's life hard either, but I think with there is some honor and integrity in the black cab trade, and you do feel I'm not a Londoner anymore. I suppose I'm born in London, so maybe I'm still a Londoner.
You're always a Londoner, right?
I think when you live in London, you're a Londoner no matter where you're from, and that's one of the things I love about the city. But when you're a Londoner, you just know the black cab drivers, they have this esteem, I suppose, and that I think that's a really cool thing about the city as well. It's a part of the way in which it bleeds into that kind of the history of the city as well. You feel that there's a lot of things when you're driving around London. If for those who listening who haven't been, you 100% should go to London, and you should get a cab with taxi, as you get a cab with Tom. It's an amazing city where you just see history all over the place, including these black cabs, but also all the buildings and things. And I think that richness of history is something which goes alongside this esteem that these cab drivers have. I do still question though, surely it needs to adapt with time, and and also promote the things better that the cabs have. They have more seats, they have more space, some of them are electric like yours, and some of them have a nice sunroof where you can see the London sky that is not raining, by the way, on top of Tom right now. That was a joke for anyone watching on the YouTube channel. Sorry for those just listening. But I think promoting those things, promoting the payment options, making sure that people understand it is different now, because as well with the history comes some preconceived ideas. And I know that you guys, you have all the different payment options. There are apps associated with the taxis now and things. Well, what do you think to that? In terms of adaptation, are things changing? Are there changes on the horizon that you're aware of? Are you trying to make changes?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a shift. Definitely, in the time that I've just before the time I came out, some people will say that Uber coming along has probably forced black cab drivers to change them a bit. I wasn't a black cab driver. I knew what was going on in the trade before Uber came along. I've only been working since Uber's been around. So, but things like the adoption of credit card, being able to pay by credit card in every single black cab is wondrous. It's amazing, because we live in a real world now. Not everyone has cash. That slowly as it's going to be eradicated, and it's not something I like to hear, because cash is cool. I like the idea of having X amount of money in my wallet. If I go out spending and it's gone, you can physically see that money's gone. There's a physical attachment to that, whereas I think we're in more credit card debt because people are spending more on credit cards, because you don't have that physical attachment to money anymore. But look at the bigger picture. People get paid monthly into their bank accounts. 80% of society that isn't self-employed, that is employed or whatever, will get paid that way. But so it's so good that black cabs all accept that, and I really don't mind, because that then means I don't have to carry as much cash. I don't have to go to the bank to pay it in. It gets paid directly into my bank account. And I know as well that, if we were still in a point where I couldn't take card, if someone says, "Oh, I can't pay, mate," there's not much of an option. But everyone's got a card, everyone's got contactless, tap and go. It's so easy. In terms of accessibility, and this is again one of the other things that's kind of a bit annoying with the private hire versus taxi debacle, is that every London cab has to be 100% wheelchair accessible. So, having things like disabled ramps, there's parts in my cab here that have got these real bright, it's a specific vehicle, of course, but all these bright yellow parts, might think these just look pretty, but these are for people with disability impairments, like sight impairments rather, so they can physically see all the handles, all the big points that they can grab and contact in here, for example. It has to have all of those things. There's a lot of hoops we have to go through to clear ourselves with TfL, really. There's only a choice of 2 vehicles at the moment, and as you mentioned, electric. So if you want to invest in this trade, you have to buy an electric capable vehicle. If you say, right, I'm a black cab driver, I want to get the most from it, I want to do the best for my business, it has to be electric. All the diesels are slowly going and dying out. So yeah, I hope that covers some of the things I think you were saying.
Yeah, no, I think it is. It shows that there's movement. I definitely think there's movement and change. I go back to you again. So I think what I admire about you as well, you've diversified. So you've also set up this YouTube channel. It's interesting you said you had an identity crisis. I think that's an interesting motivator, I suppose, that maybe we dig in a little bit more in, because I know that you came from a past, you were working, you said you were a barista in Starbucks, and then you decided to change and sort of have a bit more freedom, do the knowledge and graduated there in 2017, right? I think, and then from there you've kind of also then been helping people with your YouTube. You've written this book. Like, what's next? Like, what are you hoping to achieve with your YouTube, or is there something different coming for you? Like, what do you think? I actually think the guiding. I looked at your TripAdvisor, and I think this guiding thing is a really good idea. But is that something you're really keen on, or is there something else on the horizon for you?
So I originally got into taxi driving because of kind of that freedom of work, and I've never really held down jobs for that long. Like, I've always bounced back to retail and kind of customer serving stuff, because I think deep down I just like that connection with people, understanding people, being able to help people out. Taxi driving was kind of more just for me being able to move more into a self-employed basis and think, right, this isn't going to be the be-all and end-all. I'm not going to be a taxi driver and live out my days until retirement. It's like, right, now what? I've got a nice platform that I can work with here. I'm self-employed. I'm accountable to my own hours. I can put all the other fun stuff around that. Be that if I want to start a new hobby, or be that start a new business venture. But like as you mentioned, obviously, doing the tour guiding, that kind of fits very neatly as an extension to cab driving. And I think as well, driving around London, as you mentioned, the richness of the history around here, it's just rude not to get involved with everything it has to, because I'm here every day. Like, I'm effectively coming out in the cab, people are paying me to take them to places, and I can sort of start looking at all these buildings, memorising all the dates on the buildings, what that all means, and tying it all together. So that's just kind of me keeping my brain active and the sort of richness of history that I enjoy. And then the YouTube, for me, was being able to spread, like, the message, or, like, what I do in the cab, or what I think's good about life. I mean, some people, and you might have noticed this as well, but some of the sort of ways I present myself on YouTube is kind of rehashing what I've learned in books and things. I want to be able to do kind of a bit of a book review on YouTube, but sometimes I just do it in the form of a nice story or what I've learned in the cab. And it's largely just to kind of spread that to a much wider audience, because any job provides value to someone. When I was working as a barista in Starbucks, you're providing coffee to someone that has some kind of value to it. Whether you're a teacher and you're teaching like a class full of kids, or even if me in this cab, like I'm one-on-one, I'm providing value to people getting across London. But the power of what we have now, and I think is so amazing, is YouTube and podcasts and books and things like that are so accessible to everyone now. I think it's amazing that we live in a world that anyone can do this.
Yeah.
We look at entrepreneurs of the past who think, it was easy back then because no one was doing it. No, it was harder back then because you couldn't get hold of all this stuff. So
Yeah.
you know, like as it's mentioned, you're obviously on the book. I've written a book. You know, you've got a podcast. I've got a YouTube channel. We all have cameras and everything like that. So for me, it was being able to get on YouTube and be able to spread that to the widest possible audience. Because at the end of the day, sharing, giving, that's kind of where humanity sits. Like there's only, let's say you earn like all the money in the world. Like if you just go sit in your room until your dying days, like is that a life worth lived? Not really. You have to share your experiences and what you've then done with everyone around you for it to. Even if you've been on holiday, you know, when you come back, what's the first thing you do? You tell your friends, I went here, we did this. Do you want to see some photos when I was on holiday? We have a natural inclination to share.
No, I've already seen them. They're on Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. But that's, I think, the human nature of it. And using these online platforms, and being able to spread that to the widest reach. Who knows what I might be doing in a few years' time. What I'm loving is being able to sort of learn, look at different things, emulate people's lifestyles and think, you know what, next year I might not be doing it. 2 years' time, who knows? And so long as you can just sort of just ride that wave and just see where it goes, really.
Yeah, I think I feel very confident for you, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your butt. I think it's I feel very confident for you because I think you're clearly very intelligent, but I think that shows in a big part because to just pass the knowledge, to take it on like you did and pass it, I think that shows a lot of intelligence. But then when you talk, you're very authentic. You're very what's the right word? Erudite. Oh my god, did I just use that word?
Wow, I love a good word. I don't know what that word means, but I'm gonna have to steal that.
I think it's right. You're very good with words. You're a wordsmith, let's say, and you're very natural. So I think those things all stand hugely in your favour. And I see some of the things you're doing. You know, you're somewhat jumping on bandwagons in terms of the Geoguesser type of thing, which is a whole. There's a huge realm of Geoguesser videos coming on out there.
I didn't realise there was a community of it. I found this game and I was like, this is kind of cool. Like, it's Google Street View. Like, I love maps and streets. Like, that's what I love. Like, and
I was saying you're jumping on the bandwagon, but I think it's totally fine to jump on the bandwagon.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
First of all, you enjoy, and secondly, it's kind of like it's really interesting for other people to watch. So I mean, I've been nerding out massively, and he's actually another guy who I'm trying to get on the podcast, but he's so busy. He's the guy who did, I don't know if you saw the straight line video.
Tom, yeah, he actually emailed me after.
Did he?
Yeah,
lucky.
I honestly, when I saw that email come through, I was like, "Oh my god, wow!"
Yeah, he's awesome. He's awesome,
and
his the way he does his videos, it reminded me a lot when I saw yours. I was like, yeah, this is the same type of authenticity, just naturally, you know, witty and kind of easygoing, easy to watch. I mean, maybe I don't. It's clearly not just a British thing because people from all over the world are following Tom in particular. You know, he's like he's hugely popular now. So I think I feel very confident for you, and I feel confident as well with the Black Cab and the fact that you're doing the tour guiding and stuff. So I'm not here as like I didn't want to be too controversial and make out like I feel like the industry's dying or something. But I think back to, you know, what the point was about the industry was that it's just changing, and the strategy needs to change from TfL, especially from Transport for London. I think they need to. I think
adapt. I can see where they've come from, and what the reason why it will always be a bit of a problem is that with private hire licenses, how it works for Transport for London is that someone makes an application and it's probably like £200-250. At one point, I think there's about 110,000 private hire licenses in London. And to give you some sort of idea of those numbers, there's only ever been, like, the maximum amount of black cab drivers is 25,000. So you're talking almost 5 times the amount of black cab drivers there's ever been private hire licenses. And the thing is, in terms of the application, they're not actually, you don't have to go through the knowledge process. So that's a very quick buck. They've only got to like apply it, and then, you know, within, I think it's like 3 to 6 months, something like that, they can be driving. So in terms of a revenue, it was basically like a license to print money for Transport for London. They've just got to another driver wants to apply, cool. And, you know, it's just bang, 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 you know, easy money, really. So it's a nice revenue spinner for them. But I don't think they've really looked at the long-term effect of it, you know, in terms of congestion on the streets, being able to vet that many drivers because of the sheer volume of applications coming through. And we've got the mayor elections coming up this next month in May of 2021, and I'm sure every Mayor of London will want to utilise that sheer volume of, because it's a big business for London. Let's face it. Now that all these private hire drivers are here, whether it's Uber, whether it's someone else, it's going to be here to stay. You'd be silly not to look at that as a big revenue source and go, you know what, let's get rid of it. It's not going to happen. They're going to be here.
No, I don't think they could regulate it better, and they could also look to learn from that industry as well. I mean, I'm fascinated here in Oslo. You mentioned about payments. I found out yesterday that Norway is the lowest number of cash payments in the world now. It's like 4 or 5% of transactions or something cash, and we never see cash anymore. But and so I was sort of laughing to myself because they're worrying about the banks not providing cash services anymore, and that's like they're now going to put in legislation for that here. But also all these food what are they called in England, like Deliveroo and the Just Eat and all of that, all these people on bikes driving everywhere now, and I'm sure you're constantly cursing at them in the roads in London, because I would imagine they're all cycling all over the place in front of you, but they're everywhere now, and I'm surprised. I think that industry is going to find new revenue sources, delivering, click and buy from shops and things, post corona times and stuff. So I think there's lots of innovations coming, and I think the taxi drivers, and the taxi world is going to see innovations too. So I'm optimistic.
I've just got to add, Nick, before we go further, I don't know if we cut this out, but I'm 7% of battery on the...
That's all right. Listen,
if not, I mean, we could just switch over to the phone, and then, because I can literally lean that up in the same way, so if you want to switch it together there.
I tell you what, Tom, I'm gonna wrap it up anyway, because I feel I have taken lots of your time, and I super appreciate it.
No worries, that's cool. Yeah.
Maybe we touch base again sometime. I really hope for the best for you. People in London listening to this, you have to now do this. You have to go and click on the link to Tom's website, book him up for a tour around London in his electric cab. He's corona friendly. I mean, he's not friendly to corona, but he's all the right levels of corona friendliness. He's got everything covered on that front, and I think it looks like it's the weather in London now to go and see that beautiful city.
Definitely.
So anyone visiting, he does stopovers in layovers from Heathrow as well. I've seen that on TripAdvisor. So you've picked people up and done tours and things from
people just want to get out the air. That me is just saving people from the airport. A 9-hour layover at Heathrow, no thanks. Let's go into London, see London for 3 hours, grab some lunch, head back, and then you can carry on your way to Italy or wherever you're going.
There you go. And Tom would be the perfect person to take you around doing that. So
thank you, Nick.
Get in touch and let him know you found him through me, so he knows that this was worth his time.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
but Tom, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, mate, and I wish you all the best. And thanks for your time talking to me about these things. Is there any last pieces of wisdom you'd like to share that you wanted to put out there to the world?
Well, that's a big, ambiguous question. My brain's just firing all these philosophy quotes from Socrates and Marcus Aurelius and all that. Do this, do that. It won't make you happy.
Watch my videos. That's what you say. Watch my videos. There's a lot of knowledge there.
Well, you've already done that all for me. So I suppose it's just to kind of just be open to anything. Here's me talking about Uber and the state of play and everything. I really don't want to get myself into a position where I'm just kind of trying to repeat the same rhetoric of what everyone else is saying, or just to suit my agenda, because that's just a fool's game. You've got to look at it on a much bigger picture, and attack everything from all different angles, really, which isn't always easy to do. It sometimes can be a bit painful, but you got to embrace pain at certain points in your life.
I think the struggle is what makes it all worthwhile, right? I think
Definitely.
You even said that in one of your videos, but I totally agree. It's the struggle that makes it worthwhile. I'm trying to push myself to be better all the time as well. So I believe in that very strongly. Tom, I'll let you go. Thank you so much, and all the best. Safe traveling around London, safe driving, and we hope to see you again on the podcast sometime.
Take care, Nick. It'll be a pleasure.
Right.
Hi, just a quick outro now. Thank you very much for listening, and thanks for being here right to the bitter end. Just wanted to say, please like, subscribe, do all the magic there, and review or rate it. If you're listening on the podcast app, you can just swipe up within that. If it's on the Apple podcast app, you can swipe up within the episode guide, and there's a place at the bottom there for reviewing and rating podcasts. I would super appreciate your help in getting the word out there, and also any any constructive feedback you have, please do jump in contact with me through LinkedIn or wherever. I really appreciate every message I get, both positive and negative. So thank you so much for those who followed me on this journey. I've got more to come, and I'll leave you to it. All right.